Hello guys, welcome to my channel. This again is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and today I'm going to be doing a reading that has been asked by many viewers since maybe about a year ago. Well, not a year ago, but maybe about a few months ago when I started doing a lot of celebrity psychic readings, and this was the Jonbenet Ramsey case. And it's been a case that I had not wanted to touch because of the fact that there's a lot of touchy subject and just a lot of energy here that is not very good. So getting into this reading, I had to go ahead and shield myself with prayer and meditation getting into this. But I'm going to go ahead and give you exactly what I get from Spirit about who it's kind of hard because there are still certain family members that are living in this whole case. One being, I believe, the father, and then the brother Burke. So, I'm limited to what I can give you, but I am going to give you exactly what I get from Spirit. So when I look at, a lot of people had thrown guilt immediately on John Ramsey being the guilty one who murdered his child, Jonbenet. For those of you that are not from America or not in tune or are not aware, maybe younger generations that were not aware of the Jonbenet Ramsey. Basically, she was a little girl at 6 years old. She was murdered, and she was a beauty pageant child. So she grew up in the beauty pageants, and she won, awards and whatnot. But it was almost like the mom was living vicariously through the daughter in many ways. But a lot of people have speculated, what was going on. When I tune into John Ramsey, I get that he is a man that has a lot of pain. I get that he has a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear around it, even though it's been years since the case. There's people that would still be hounding him and Burke and other family members, in the family that are, related anyhow. Um, but I get that, there's a lot of anxiety. Things were never the same for him after losing Jonbenet. This was a big case. It was blown up through social media. There was a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of, information being exchanged through social media. Um, which really, social media was really like TV back then, TV or magazines or newspapers. And there was a lot of articles and documentaries that have been made since then, with theories of who committed the crime, who committed the murder against Jonbenet Ramsey. So, out of respect to Jonbenet and her soul, since she was a little child, I didn't want to put her image up here on the screen. I want to focus on the parents here, and I'm not going to focus on Burke. Now, I will say this, that when I did go ahead and about a year ago, or I can't remember when that interview took place, but I remember seeing that interview on TV, and I saw Burke on that interview and him going through that, her brother. And I did find it very odd that he was um, smiling, through the whole thing, which led, a lot of people to kind of speculate that it was him. But I feel like he has been traumatized by this whole experience, and there is a certain level, perhaps, of issues, that he would have had on the psychological level because of all of this. And again, there's a lot of fear around it. I feel like he does know exactly, more or less, like what happened. This was all kept very tight in the family. I feel like John knows exactly what happened here. These two, but when I get into the soul of John Ramsey, I feel like he loved Jonbenet completely. I don't feel like there was any level of sexual abuse from him at all, contrary to what a lot of theories and people may be thinking of him. A lot of them have blamed him unjustly. I don't get that from his soul. I just don't get it. Um, I do feel like he was very much, surprised by all of this when it did happen, and it was like it took a toll on the family completely. When I get into a Burke, the son, I've seen his energy. I don't have his picture up here on the screen. With Burke, I get a lot of trauma, a lot of emotional trauma. He's still dealing with it. I feel like he has to be very careful as well, because there's a lot of people that, that to this day that maybe think or blame him for some reason, that he was the one that did it. But again, regardless of what we saw on TV on the interview and him smiling, um, or what it appeared to be a smile, I don't feel like it was a smile in many ways. I feel like that's just his personality, and I feel like it's like almost like him trying to put on kind of like a happy face in some ways. I feel like his eyes are very wild, very intense, but I feel like he is part of a star seed. I feel like he's very different than many people, and people wouldn't get him. But his eyes, and Jonbenet was also a star seed in many ways. So these children have beautiful eyes, and they're very much, now he's an adult, but his eyes, I feel like, is what people are really looking at, not so much of the smile. And then some people are looking at both. But again, I don't get that that Burke would have been responsible for the passing of Jonbenet. Now, when I get into the father, John, I don't see that he is responsible for this. Um, when I get into the mother's energy, Patsy, I feel like she um, had two personalities. I feel like she had some issues here with how she handled stress and how she handled life. I feel like growing up, she may have been herself experienced some things in her own family that could have been like on the level of abuse. So again, I'm very limited in what I can give here, but I am going to kind of give you more or less, what I'm getting from spirit about this case. And I do get that she would have been going through some emotional problems when Jonbenet was, in these pageants. And to a certain level, I feel like there was a little bit of jealousy in many ways, even if this was not something that was fully acknowledged or, given, brought to light. But a lot of her interviews, if you look at her face and you look at the expressions and the way, her tone, and if you look at, I'm looking not just at that, I'm looking at the soul from the photograph, because I read off of photographs. When I look at people's eyes, that's the windows to the soul. I get someone that is not being truthful. I get immediately that there is some jealousy. And people would be saying, well, why would she be jealous of her own daughter? In many ways, I feel like there was a lot of, Jonbenet being on the spotlight, being in pageants and getting all this attention. Her father, again, adored her. And I feel like Burke, I feel like to a certain point, there was a lot of things being covered up by John and by Burke. And, um, this was a very wealthy family. And I feel like, there was a lot of evidence that was staged completely. I feel like there was a certain moment when Miss Ramsey would have possibly snapped. Again, that's what I'm getting from spirit. And it's very possible that, that, again, that things got out of hand in a heated situation. Am I saying that she did it? I'm not allowed to say that here on my channel. I'm not going to say that. But a lot of people can make their own, judgment calls when they look into, go and look at, video footage. There's on YouTube, there's a lot of video footage of interviews of them being questioned. The letter that was written, the ransom note, it was in her handwriting. It's obvious. And she denied it. She denied it when, this was when she was being questioned. I still ask myself, why wasn't their polygraph test done immediately after the murder? Why wasn't that done? I guess because there are certain rights and maybe, certain protections against the family. And I feel like the family knew the DA and the prosecutor. So there was some kind of leverage there, whether or not they were paid off to or swayed, or they had some kind of dirt on the DA or, the people involved in the judicial system, for the prosecution of this. Again, all of this is very staged, and there was problems between Patsy and John in their marriage. I am getting that exactly in many ways. Now, Patsy, for those of you that would be tuning in, she's no longer with us here. She did have cancer, and it had gone away and it came back. These are facts, that she had cancer. In many ways, we are held accountable, like I've said this before, for crimes and for things that we do here in the physical world. people are held accountable. You can be held accountable in many ways by a judicial system, and you can also be held accountable by your own health in many ways. And a lot of times, the things that form it as health issues are because we carry deep regret, and we keep we have a lot of dark energy that we have maybe held on to for quite some time. And it starts, when we know something and it's like a secret and we cover it up, it starts manifesting in the chakras and the different energy points of the body. And I do feel to a certain extent that this is what happened. Patsy knew something. John knew something. Um, and again, Burke knows something. So I feel like what the crime that happened and took place, it did happen within the inside of the house. I don't feel like there was any third party that was responsible for the murder. I don't get that there would have been any other external person that broke into the house. All of this that happened, um, and somebody in the household is responsible for it. And there was theories that that Burke had did it, and that Patsy was covering up for him, and so was John, because they didn't want him to do it. I don't get that. I don't get that at all. And again, I'm not blaming anyone in particular, but I'm just saying from what Spirit has given me, it's a very strong possibility that the person that is responsible was in the family. And I do not get John, and I do not get Burke to be the people responsible for the passing. So again, there's a lot of things. Like I said, there would have been some problems in the marriage, a lot of stress, a lot of sleepless nights. I feel like in many ways there was a lot of regret. Patsy had to be self-medicated. There would have been medication to treat anxiety, to treat depression, um, a lot of different things that would have had to been given. Um, a lot of remorse from her soul that has now passed. I get a lot of remorse when I tune into her soul on the other side. Um, Jonbenet is definitely in a good place. Immediately, I feel like angels took her soul, and they crossed her over to the other side. So people that have been speculating or wondering, and there was rumors that Katy Perry is Jonbenet, which are just absurd rumors. But I do get that this case is never going to be fully solved, because this is the way that it's been meant to be. I do feel at one point when someday, when it's only Burke left, that he may come out later on and talk about what he knows, and then he may not, about what he knows that really went on. He was interviewed by Dr. Phil, and in it, it was very eerie, the interview, because people speculate, his smile, his eyes had this, but people are judging by the eyes, not so much the energy. But again, people that are listening to this on my channel may not agree with me. They may not agree that this was, um, how I'm saying it was done. But again, I do get that there would have been sadness in the family after it all happened. But it was a crime of passion, of intense heated situation. I feel like there was every time that Patsy saw Jonbenet, there was some issues there. I feel like Jonbenet was kind of like didn't like the fact the way the mom talked to her, and I feel like Jonbenet would run away from her and would go to Daddy, would go to John. And I feel like immediately, like Patsy would have had some issues with that, that he would always take Jonbenet's side, and she felt like she was the bad guy in many ways. But again, I'm not saying that she did it, or John. I already ruled out John and Burke. You know, a lot of people would be listening to this and saying, that's insane. She was a Christian woman. She always wore her crucifixes in interviews, and she had, her crosses hanging on her. You have to kind of ask yourself, why, and also, there was an interview with Nancy Grace. I believe it was Nancy Grace. I can't remember the reporter, but I believe she's the one that does a lot of criminal investigations. uh, or she did at one time, and she did make up an obvious point that when it came, the police came to the doorsteps of the Ramsey's family, that Patsy came out in full hair, eyelashes, makeup, everything was done in the clothes that she'd been wearing the previous night. So it was almost like weird, And again, I get that everything was definitely staged in the house. Moments of panic and, calling 911. A lot of this was all staged in many ways to cover up the story, cover it up. But whoever, I feel like whoever did it is being held accountable in many ways. Whether they're living or they are past, they are being held accountable. And I feel like there was a lot of things that have already happened. But again, um, it's just a very sad case. I don't feel like, that people will ever be able to really have a peace in their hearts and souls when it comes to this case. I knew immediately when I was very young, it was probably about in 1995. I would have been 12, no, it would have been about 14 years old, 13 or 14 years old. And I remember seeing the case on TV and or whenever this case happened, and I was a little bit older than Jonbenet and about the age of Burke, I believe. But I remember seeing the case, and I was like, she was murdered, and I always felt that it was something, off about the case as well. So this is, what I'm getting intuitively, what I'm getting from the whole family dynamic. A lot of secrets, a lot of cover-ups. Patsy was never the same after the murder, and I feel like she um, turned to medicine, to prescription medicine, whatever she would have been taking to kind of deal with a lot of the emotions that she would be having within herself. But that is what I'm getting from Spirit. So if you have any other suggestions of any other readings, please leave it in the comment section below. Also, be sure to visit me on my social media and follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and that social media handles at Psychic Medium Ray. Blessings and love and light. Have an amazing day.